My own son betrayed me, framed me, and sent me to prison for 2 years, accusing me of causing his wife's miscarriage, a crime I never committed. Month after month they came to visit, asking for forgiveness, pretending to care. I refused to see them. Prison taught me patience, silence, and something far more dangerous than anger. They believed I was broken, forgotten, finished. They never realized that while they despised me, while they lived comfortably on what they stole, I was dismantling their world piece by piece from the inside. The day I walked free would not be my redemption. It would be their downfall. Welcome and thank you for being here. Before the story goes any deeper, tell me this. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop a comment with your city or country and let me know you're here with me. And just so you know, the story ahead includes some fictionalized elements added to strengthen the narrative and its message. Any resemblance to real people or places is purely coincidental, but the truth at its core remains real.
With the tip of my thumbnail rough and chipped from 729 days of this hell, I traced another thin vertical line into the concrete wall beside my iron cot. The motion had become ritual, sacred almost. A way to mark time in a place designed to make you forget it existed at all. 729. Tomorrow would be day 730. Tomorrow, I would walk out of Georgia State Prison a free man. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stale October air that tasted like rust and broken promises. Even at night, the heat made my cell feel like an oven. The humidity clung to everything: the damp walls, my wrinkled shirt, the thin mattress that had been my bed for 2 years. 2 years that felt like 20. I sat cross-legged on that excuse for a mattress and let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Before this place, I had slept in a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets in my Buckhead estate. Before this nightmare, I was Benjamin Ashford, founder of Pinnacle Industries, a company worth $120 million. Now, I was just inmate A47239, a number, a ghost of the man I used to be. But ghosts, I had learned, could be dangerous. The memories came whether I wanted them or not. They always did in the quiet hours, the courthouse. Judge Charles Winters, sitting up there on his bench with that cold, calculating gaze, a gaze I now knew had been bought and paid for. And there on the witness stand in his perfectly pressed suit, my own son, Trevor, my flesh and blood, manufacturing sorrow on his face like some Hollywood actor going for an Oscar. I loved my father, Your Honor. His voice had trembled just right. He had practiced that tremor, I was sure of it now. But I cannot justify his actions. He pushed my wife down the stairs. She was pregnant, Your Honor. He killed my unborn child. The jury had eaten it up. Every rehearsed word, every crocodile tear. Then came Scarlett Monroe, sitting in that wheelchair, one hand pressed against her flat stomach, the other clutching a tissue like it was her only lifeline. The tears rolled down her cheeks right on cue. Father Ashford screamed at me. She had sobbed, her voice small and broken. Then he pushed me. I felt my baby dying inside me. Lies. Every single word was a goddamn lie. I had gone to Trevor's office that October day 2 years ago to confront him about the money. $2.7 million missing from Pinnacle's accounts. Shell companies, fake invoices, the kind of embezzlement that could land you in federal prison. I had the proof. I had the documents. I was going to give him one chance to come clean, to make it right, to be the son I had raised him to be. But I never touched Scarlett. She had been there, yes, standing at the top of those stairs in Trevor's downtown office building. I had raised my voice, I would not deny that. I had been furious, betrayed, but I had never laid a hand on her, never even stepped close enough to. And then she had thrown herself down those stairs. I remembered it in slow motion sometimes in my nightmares. The way she had looked at Trevor first, something passing between them in that glance. Then she had simply let go of the railing and tumbled backward, her body rolling down those marble steps like a rag doll. The security camera had mysteriously malfunctioned during those crucial minutes. All the footage showed was me at the top of the stairs, fury on my face, and Scarlett's broken body at the bottom. Convenient, clean, damning. When the gavel struck and the judge read the verdict guilty on all counts, my world had collapsed. I had watched Trevor embrace Scarlett in the courtroom gallery, and in that moment, I had caught something in his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, just cold calculation. The look of a man who had just eliminated the only obstacle between him and a fortune. I had tried to fight, but Trevor had moved fast. He filed an emergency petition to freeze my accounts, claiming I was mentally unstable. Without access to my money, I could not afford the attorneys who might have saved me. I was stuck with an overworked public defender who had barely looked at my case before advising me to take a guilty plea. I had refused, I had gone to trial, and I had lost everything. "Theodore, you daydreaming again?" The raspy voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to see Henry Miller sitting on his own cot, folding his prison uniform with the kind of precision that came from too many years behind bars. He was in his early 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Just counting Henry," I replied quietly. Henry set down his folded shirt and studied me. "Tomorrow you walk free. If I were you, I would be praising the Lord doing a little dance something. But you," he shook his head, "you are too calm, Theo, like a man heading to the grocery store not walking out of hell." I allowed myself a faint smile that did not reach my eyes. I stood and walked to the cracked mirror above the rust-stained sink. The man staring back at me was different from the one who had entered this place 729 days ago. My hair was streaked with gray now. My face had hardened. The softness that came from good living had been stripped away, leaving something leaner, hungrier. My eyes had gone dark, not with despair, but with something patient and cold. I had lost 25 pounds, not from the terrible food, but from the rage that burned inside me like a furnace. That rage had kept me warm through the cold Georgia nights. It had kept me sharp when everything in this place was designed to dull you. I thought of Elizabeth, my wife of 30 years, 3 years dead now. Cancer had taken her before she could see what our son had become. Maybe that was a mercy. Maybe she was lucky to have missed this betrayal. But God, how I wish she were here. "Henry," I said softly, my eyes still on my reflection. "The real hell is not here." Henry raised an eyebrow. "No." I turned to face him, and I let him see what I had become. "The real hell is out there waiting for me, because tomorrow when I walk out of this cage, hell is going to follow me out." Henry said nothing. He just watched me with those sharp old eyes, and I thought I saw something like respect there. I lay back down on my cot and stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the concrete the way I had counted the days. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Trevor and Scarlett would be waiting outside those gates with their cameras and their reporters and their performance of reconciliation. They would play their parts expecting me to play mine, the broken old man, the confused father, the convict grateful for his family's mercy. But I had learned patience in this cell. Patience was a weapon, and revenge was a dish best served cold. I had been freezing mine for 729 days. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the cell block, someone was crying. Someone else was laughing. The sounds of the night watch beginning their rounds echoed through the concrete corridors. And then cutting through all of it came the announcement. "Visitation hours." The words crackled through the ancient speakers mounted in the corners of every cell. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway outside, not the usual shuffle of prison guards in their thick-soled boots. These were different, the kind of footsteps that came with expensive shoes and even more expensive lies. My son was coming again, one last desperate attempt. Of course. The guard led me down the corridor to the visitation room, his grip firm on my elbow. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like trapped insects. After 729 days, I knew every crack in these walls, every stain on the linoleum. They seated me at the bolted table wrists, cuffed ankles chained to the floor ring. Standard procedure for inmates within 48 hours of release. As if I might suddenly decide freedom wasn't worth the wait. The door opened. Trevor walked in, wearing $4,500 worth of Italian wool. Charcoal gray perfectly tailored the kind of suit that announced power before its wearer said a word. His tie was silk, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. My son had learned to dress like the emperor of an empire he'd stolen. Scarlett followed no wheelchair today. She moved with fluid grace, her cream-colored dress expensive and modest, her hair falling in perfect waves. She looked like she'd never fallen downstairs, never lost a child, never suffered anything worse than a chipped nail. They sat across from me, and I studied Trevor's face, searching for the boy who used to build model airplanes with me in the garage. I found nothing but cold calculation. "Hello, Father." The word came out bitter. "You're looking well?" I held his gaze until he looked away. Scarlett placed a leather folder on the table, her manicured hands careful, precise. Her wedding ring, $18,000, bought when I still believed in happy endings, caught the light. "We need you to sign something," Trevor said. $4 million from Mother's Trust. Requires biometric verification. With the audit starting tomorrow, we need to move quickly. I leaned back against my chains and smiled. An audit? How unfortunate for you. His jaw tightened. Don't play games. You know what's at stake. Do I... Scarlett leaned forward, voice honey sweet. Benjamin, we're trying to help. Trevor's been running Pinnacle successfully for 2 years. The board is happy. Why create problems? Problems would, I repeated. Interesting word for justice. Justice! Trevor laughed sharp as broken glass. You assaulted my pregnant wife. You're lucky you only got 2 years. I studied Scarlett's perfect mask of wounded innocence. She'd practiced that expression, perfected it for the jury, for every camera that documented my fall. Sign the papers, Trevor said again, desperation creeping into his professional polish. Tomorrow morning, you walk out with nothing. No money, no company, no home. I've frozen every account, every asset. You'll be a 73-year-old man with a criminal record and nowhere to go. Is that a threat, son? It's reality. The door opened again. Rebecca walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. My daughter wore black a suit that was all business, all ice. Her hair pulled back severely, her face composed in an expression I'd never seen before. Not warmth, not love, not even anger. Just cold professional neutrality, as if I were a case file instead of her father. She didn't greet me, didn't touch my shoulder like she had during other visits. She simply stood beside Trevor, posture, perfect face, unreadable. Rebecca. I tested her name carefully. She met my eyes, and for one fraction of a second, so brief I might have imagined it, something flickered across her face. Pain rage. Then it vanished behind that terrible mask. Dad. Her voice was flat. You should sign. It's for the best. The audit won't find anything useful. Trevor's managed everything legally. Fighting will only hurt you more. The words hit harder than Trevor's threats. I searched her face for the little girl who used to climb into my lap and demand bedtime stories, the teenager who'd defended me against every criticism, the young woman who had visited me faithfully for 2 years. I found nothing, just ice. Cooperation would be wise, she continued, each word measured. Tomorrow you'll need a fresh start. Fighting a battle you can't win will only make that harder. Trevor smirked, leaning back with obvious satisfaction. See, even Rebecca knows when to be practical. I looked between them, my son, my daughter-in-law, my daughter. 3 against 1. The family I'd built, the legacy I'd worked 50 years to create, all turned against me in this fluorescent tomb. No, I said simply. Trevor's face darkened. You're making a mistake. Am I? I shifted forward, chains clinking. Tomorrow I walk out, and then you'll learn what mistakes really look like. Empty threats from an old man? Scarlett's voice dripped contempt. You have nothing. You are nothing. I smiled, letting them see my teeth. We'll see. Trevor stood abruptly, chair scraping linoleum. Last chance, father. Sign the papers, or tomorrow you'll discover exactly how deep the hole I've dug really is. Tomorrow? I savored the word. Tomorrow, son, you'll learn what real hell looks like. Because these last 2 years, this prison, these chains, I rattled the ankle cuffs. This was vacation. Tomorrow I'll show you what I've really been preparing for. Scarlett grabbed Trevor's arm, knuckles white. For the first time, I saw genuine fear flicker across her face. Trevor collected the unsigned papers, shoving them into the folder with barely controlled fury. You'll regret this. Regret? I nodded slowly. Yes, there will be plenty of that. Just not mine. They turned to leave, but Rebecca lingered. She looked at me, really looked at me, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Goodbye, Dad. Not, see you tomorrow. Not take care or good luck. Just goodbye. The word hung between us like a verdict. I studied her face, searching for meaning, in that carefully chosen phrase, in the way she held herself so rigidly, in the fractional tremor I thought I detected in her left hand, before she clenched it into a fist. Then she turned and walked out, back straight steps measured. The door closed with a hollow clang. The guard unlocked my chain. Time to go, Ashford. I let him lead me back toward my cell, but my mind was racing, replaying every moment. Trevor's desperation, Scarlett's fear, and Rebecca standing there in black face, impenetrable, delivering that final loaded word. Goodbye. Not farewell. Not until tomorrow. Just goodbye. As if she were letting go of something, or preparing for something. Or perhaps, and this thought lodged in my chest, like a sliver of hope I didn't dare acknowledge, perhaps saying goodbye to the version of herself that Trevor and Scarlett thought they knew. The guard's keys jangled as he opened my cell door. Rebecca stood motionless in that visitation room, I realized. Her face a mask, not a single crack in her performance, even as she watched me being led away. Whatever game was being played here, whatever truth lay beneath the surface of this family's destruction, tomorrow would reveal it. Tomorrow, everything would change. October sunlight cut through the prison gates like a blade. The guard processed my release with bureaucratic indifference, sliding a manila envelope across the counter. Inside was everything I'd entered with: $12 a wedding ring I couldn't wear anymore, and a key to a house I no longer owned. "You're free to go, Ashford." Free. The word tasted strange after 730 days. I walked through the sally port, each step deliberate. The morning air hit my face crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. October in Georgia. The world had kept turning while I'd counted days on a cell wall. The outer gate buzzed open. A crowd waited in the parking area. News vans lined the curb cameras, rolling reporters pressed against the barricade. And there, center stage, stood Trevor and Scarlett. My son held an enormous bouquet of white roses and wore an expression of practiced remorse. Scarlett stood beside him in a pale blue dress, tissues clutched in one hand. The picture of forgiveness and family reconciliation. A performance. "Dad!" Trevor's voice projected for the cameras. "Welcome home. We're so glad this misunderstanding is behind us." Misunderstanding. He'd framed me for a crime I didn't commit, and now he called it a misunderstanding. I walked toward the exit, my stride never slowing, my gaze fixed straight ahead. "Dad, wait." Trevor stepped into my path, roses thrust forward. "We want to put this behind us. Let us take you home." I walked past him, simply stepped around his outstretched arms as if he were a parking meter. "Benjamin, please." Scarlett's voice cracked with manufactured emotion. For the sake of family, I kept walking. Trevor grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, desperate. His voice dropped to a hiss the cameras couldn't catch. "Get in our car, now." I stopped, turned slowly to face him. "Let go," I said quietly, "or I will scream that I'm being assaulted. Every camera here will capture it." His grip tightened. I saw the calculation racing behind his eyes, weighing options, control his rapidly crumbling strategy. "You have nothing," he breathed. "No money, no home, nowhere to go. Let go." He released me, stepping back, the roses crumpling in his hand. I turned away, and that's when I saw it. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided into the parking lot, moving with the quiet precision of a predator. The paint gleamed like obsidian chrome details catching October light. Every camera swiveled toward it. The Rolls stopped directly in front of me, perfectly positioned. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Early 30s Navy suit, worn with effortless confidence, movements economical and professional. He walked around the car and opened the rear passenger door. "Mr. Ashford," he said, voice carrying to the cameras. "Welcome back. We have much to discuss." I caught a glimpse of the interior, cream leather, polished wood, the kind of luxury that announced serious money. Behind me, Trevor's sharp intake of breath. I turned to look at my son one last time. His face cycled through confusion, shock settling into rage. The white roses hung forgotten petals beginning to drop. Scarlett clutched his arm, her makeup unable to hide her sudden pallor. "Who is that?" someone in the press crowd called. "Mr. Ashford, who sent the car." I didn't answer, simply slid into the Rolls, feeling butter-soft leather, breathing in the scent of expensive materials and careful maintenance. The young man closed the door with a solid thunk that sealed out the chaos. He returned to the driver's seat and the car began to move. I looked through the tinted window as we glided past Trevor. My son stood, frozen bouquet dangling, his carefully orchestrated reunion collapsing. Reporters swarmed him, now microphones thrust forward, cameras closing in. "Mr. Ashford, who was that?" "Trevor. How did your father afford a Rolls-Royce? Is there money you didn't know about?" I watched Trevor's face, confusion melting into panic, melting into fury as we pulled away, leaving him with his wilting flowers and crumbling lies. The driver met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Christopher Wade, sir. Harvard Law class of 2014. I've been coordinating with your associates for 18 months. Everything is ready." "Associates?" I repeated. "Yes, sir. Margaret Thompson is waiting at the office. She's prepared comprehensive files." He paused. The audit begins this morning. Mr. Trevor Ashford's corporate accounts were frozen at 8 a.m. 45 minutes ago. I leaned back against the leather seat, feeling tension begin to loosen its grip. Good, I said softly. The rolls carried us away from the prison, away from the cameras, away from Trevor's desperate performance. Through the window, Atlanta's skyline rose glass and steel towers catching morning light. My city, my company, my legacy that had been stolen, but not for much longer. Christopher drove with confident precision the interior, silent except for the whisper-soft hum of the engine. I thought about Rebecca's face yesterday, that impenetrable mask, her final word. Goodbye. I thought about Trevor's panic this morning, Scarlett's cracking composure, the reporter's questions that were just the beginning. The audit would expose the embezzlement. The frozen accounts would strangle Trevor's cash flow. This was only the first move. Where are we going? I asked. Christopher's eyes found mine in the mirror. Your estate, sir. The house in Buckhead. It's been prepared for your return. He paused. Mr. Ashford, may I say, it's an honor to be part of this. Part of what? Justice, sir. Long overdue justice. I looked out at the city passing by, at the life I'd been ripped away from, at the empire my son had tried to steal. The rolls turned onto Peachtree Road, heading north toward Buckhead, toward the neighborhood where I'd raised my children, where Elizabeth and I had built our life. Trevor had seized the house the day I was convicted, moving in with Scarlett, like conquerors claiming spoils. But Christopher had said the house was prepared for my return. What else had been prepared while I'd been marking days on a prison wall? Tell me, I said. Everything that's been set in motion. Christopher's reflection smiled. Perhaps it's better if Margaret explains, sir. She's been orchestrating most of it. I'm just one piece. And one piece of what a plan I hadn't fully known existed. Associates I'd apparently had, working on my behalf for 18 months. The questions multiplied. But for the first time in 730 days, they didn't feel like threats. They felt like possibilities. The rolls climbed through Buckhead's tree-lined streets, past estates hidden behind walls and gates, past the evidence of old money and older power. My world. The world Trevor thought he'd claimed. Take me home, I said quietly. I need to wash off the stench of that place. And then Mr. Wade. Yes, sir. I watched Atlanta slide past the window, my city waiting, my son's empire about to crack open, and 730 days of cold patience finally reaching their purpose. Then we begin the war. The St. Regis penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering Atlanta stretched to the horizon. Christopher had brought me here instead of Buckhead, explaining the estate required additional preparation. I didn't ask what that meant. Not yet. The bathroom was marble and chrome, larger than my cell had been. I stood underwater so hot, it nearly scalded, scrubbing away 730 days of institutional soap and fluorescent lighting, and that particular smell that clung to everything in that place. The water ran clear, but I kept scrubbing. My hands shook not from weakness, but from rage I'd kept compressed for 2 years. Rage at Trevor's betrayal, at Scarlett's lies, at the judge who'd accepted bribes, at every person who'd participated in destroying me, and grief. Grief for Elizabeth, who died, never knowing our son had become a monster. I pressed my palms against the marble wall and let myself break just for a moment. Silent tears mixing with scalding water shoulders, shaking with fury and loss and the weight of what came next. Then I straightened, breathed, rebuilt the walls. This wasn't the time for weakness. This was the time for war. I dried off dressed in the charcoal suit Christopher had provided, expensive but understated. Someone had taken my measurements planned for this moment. I walked into the main room and found 2 people waiting. Christopher stood by the Windows phone in hand. Beside him sat a woman I'd never seen before. She was perhaps 64, silver hair, cut short, wearing a navy pantsuit. Her face was weathered, intelligent eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She rose when I entered, extending her hand. Mr. Ashford, Margaret Thompson, it's an honor to finally meet you. Her handshake was firm, her voice carrying a faint rasp. Ms. Thompson. I studied her face. Christopher mentioned you've been preparing files. Among other things. She gestured to the conference table where manila folders were arranged in precise rows. Please sit. We have much to discuss. I settled into the leather chair, Christopher across from me, Margaret beside him. Before we begin, Margaret said, you should know my background. I'm a former inmate. Served 5 years at Federal Prison Camp Alderson for securities fraud. I know what you've endured. Her honesty was unexpected. Why tell me that? Because you need to trust me, and trust requires truth. She pushed a folder toward me. I've spent 18 months building your case. I opened it. Power of attorney revocation, signed and notarized. Emergency forensic audit request. Asset freeze orders. These are already filed. As of 8 this morning, Christopher confirmed. Trevor's corporate accounts, personal accounts, even household credit cards. Everything frozen pending audit results. I allowed myself a small smile. He's discovering that right about now. He discovered it 3 hours ago, Margaret said. His assistant called 6 different banks. All gave her the same answer accounts, frozen by order of the primary shareholder. You still hold 70% of Pinnacle Industries, Christopher added. Trevor only had proxy control. That died when you revoked the power of attorney. 70%. I'd built that company from nothing. Margaret pushed another folder forward, thicker and heavier. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday. The audit will present preliminary findings. She paused meaningfully. Trevor will be removed as CEO. Criminal charges will follow. What do we already know? Instead of answering, Margaret reached for a manila envelope sitting apart from the others. It was marked with a single letter, handwritten in blue ink. R. My breath caught. She slid it across the table. This arrived at my office 6 months ago. No return address, just this. I opened the envelope with hands that had gone suddenly steady. Inside was a USB drive and a note on plain white paper. The handwriting hit me like a physical blow. 2 years of work. Everything you need. Trust Christopher. Trust Margaret. They're loyal. R. I recognized that handwriting. The way she formed her lowercase, A is the slight upward slant. Rebecca had written letters from boarding school, from Lage, from her first job. Rebecca. My daughter standing cold and rigid yesterday, telling me to sign, to cooperate, to surrender. Unless, I whispered, unless it was an act. Margaret finished quietly. Mr. Ashford, whoever sent this, has access to Trevor's inner circle. Bank records, emails, security footage, shell company documentation. It's all here. 2 years of evidence meticulously gathered. Christopher leaned forward. We've verified everything. Shell companies and the Cayman's payoffs to Judge Charles Winters. Payments to the security company that malfunctioned their cameras the day Scarlett threw herself down those stairs. Trevor's embezzlement of $2.7 million. All documented. I stared at the letter at that single initial. Rebecca cold and professional yesterday. Rebecca telling me to sign away $4 million. Rebecca saying goodbye instead of see you tomorrow. Had she been warning me, playing a role? Building this arsenal while standing beside Trevor? How long have you known? I asked. We've suspected since the drive arrived, Margaret said. But we couldn't be certain, and we couldn't risk compromising her position if she was indeed undercover. Undercover in her own family, I said softly. Christopher's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, something like satisfaction crossing his face. Trevor just attempted to access his personal account at Wells Fargo. Denied. He's also tried the company Amex and his checking account at Chase. All frozen. I imagine my son's face right now. The confusion, the panic, the realization that his empire was collapsing. What's his cash position? As of this morning, approximately $240 in his wallet, Margaret said. Everything else is frozen. The Buckhead house is in your name. He was living there by proxy permission. The cars or corporate lease is now suspended. His clothes, his jewelry, even the bed he sleeps in, all purchased with company funds or your assets. $240. From emperor to pauper in a single morning. I want him to feel what nothing really means, I said quietly. Margaret and Christopher exchanged glances. Mr. Ashford, Margaret said carefully, what Trevor faces is complete financial destruction and federal prosecution. He'll lose everything. Is that sufficient, or did you have something more specific in mind? I looked at the USB drive, at my daughter's handwriting, at the evidence she'd gathered while standing beside Trevor, maintaining her cover. 2 years. What had that cost her? I want him removed from Pinnacle Industries, I said. I want him charged with embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. I want the world to see exactly what he is. That we can do, Christopher confirmed. And I want to know if Rebecca is safe. Margaret's expression softened. We believe so. She's maintained her cover perfectly. Trevor has no reason to suspect her. Yet. Then we proceed carefully, I said. If she's been undercover for 2 years, we don't blow that now. Not until the right moment. Agreed. I stood walking to the windows looking out over Atlanta, my city, my company. Somewhere out there, Trevor was discovering his accounts, frozen, his power evaporating. Somewhere, Rebecca was maintaining her mask, playing her dangerous game. And somewhere, justice was finally beginning. I turned back to Christopher and Margaret. Send the orders. Cut Trevor off from everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, corporate access, all of it. Oh, within the hour, Christopher promised, already typing. I looked down at the letter one more time, at that single initial that changed everything. Rebecca hadn't abandoned me. She'd been fighting for me all along. The war had begun this morning, with frozen accounts and legal orders. But the real battle, the one that would destroy Trevor completely and reveal Rebecca's sacrifice, that was still coming. I folded the letter carefully, slipping it into my jacket pocket, keeping it close. Then let's begin, I said. The sun was setting over Atlanta, casting long shadows across the penthouse. By Monday, those shadows would reach Trevor's office, his reputation, his freedom, and he would finally understand what it meant to lose everything. Bones Restaurant on Piedmont Road was the kind of place where Atlanta's power brokers closed deals over dry-aged steaks and $1,000 bottles of wine. Trevor had reserved the private dining room, the one with mahogany paneling and discreet service, where conversations about millions of dollars happened over perfectly cooked filet mignon. He sat across from Edward and Catherine Bancroft Scarlett, beside him, playing the role of supportive wife. The Bancrofts represented old Atlanta money, the kind that had survived the Civil War and every economic crisis since. $22 million was what Trevor needed. $22 million to cover the holes he dug in Pinnacle's accounts, to smooth over the embezzlement, to make everything look legitimate before the audit found the truth. The opportunity is exceptional, Trevor said, swirling bourbon in a crystal glass. 45% return on investment within 18 months, guaranteed. Edward Bancroft was 70, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, despite his age. He'd built his fortune by knowing when people were lying. That's an aggressive projection. Conservative, actually, Trevor countered smoothly. Pinnacle Industries has grown 32% under my leadership. The market projections support even higher returns. Catherine Bancroft, elegant in pearls and a navy dress, leaned forward. Trevor, dear, before we discuss business, how is your father? We heard about his release today. That must have been difficult for the family. Trevor's smile never wavered. Dad's confused, understandably. 2 years away from the business, from reality. We're taking care of him, making sure he's comfortable. Such a terrible situation, Catherine murmured. What he did to poor Scarlett. Scarlett reached for Trevor's hand, playing her part perfectly. We've forgiven him. Family is what matters. The server arrived with their check leather portfolio embossed with the Bones logo. Whenever you're ready, sir. Trevor barely glanced at it, pulling out his corporate American Express, the black card that had no limit, the one that announced power and wealth. He slid it into the portfolio without looking at the total. The server disappeared. Edward returned to business. This $22 million investment, walked me through the specifics. Which markets are we targeting? Trevor launched into his pitch, the one he'd practiced for weeks. Real estate development in emerging Atlanta neighborhoods. Tech startups with proven models, diversified portfolio with minimal risk. The lies came easily now. He'd been lying for 2 years. The server returned, his expression apologetic. Sir, I'm sorry, but this card was declined. Would you like to try another? The words landed like a slap. Trevor's smile flickered. That's impossible. Run it again. I did, sir, 3 times. It's not going through. Heat crept up Trevor's neck. Across the table, Edward and Catherine exchanged glances. Use this one. Trevor pulled out his personal Visa, the one linked to his checking account. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. Technical glitch. Had to be. The corporate card had never been declined, not once in 2 years. The server took the card and disappeared again. Scarlett's fingers tightened on Trevor's arm, her nails digging in slightly. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes were panicked. System errors, Trevor said with a laugh that sounded forced even to his own ears. Technology right. Edward's expression had shifted from interested to evaluating. This was how deals died, not with dramatic rejections, but with small moments of doubt, tiny cracks in the facade. The server returned, his discomfort visible. Sir, this card was also declined. Do you have another method of payment? The dining room suddenly felt too small, too hot. Every eye in the place seemed to turn toward their table. "That's impossible," Trevor said, voice tight. "Both cards?" "Yes, sir." "Perhaps you could call your bank." Trevor stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. "Excuse me, I need to make a call." He walked out into the restaurant's foyer, pulling out his phone, dialing Michael Harris. His CFO picked up on the first ring. "Michael, what the hell is going on?" "My cards are being declined." Silence on the other end. Then, "Trevor, where are you?" "Bones, having dinner with the Bancrofts, my cards." "All your accounts have been frozen," Michael interrupted. "Every single one. Corporate, personal, everything." The floor seemed to tilt. "What?" "SEC order came through at 5 this afternoon. Emergency forensic audit authorized by—" Michael paused. "Authorized by your father, as primary shareholder." Trevor's hand clenched around the phone. "That's not possible. He doesn't have access." "He revoked your power of attorney this morning. The moment he was released, he became active majority shareholder again. He ordered a complete freeze on all accounts pending audit results. The $4 million withdrawal. Canceled. Nothing moves until the audit is complete. And Trevor," Michael's voice dropped, "you need to turn on CNBC now." Trevor looked around wildly, spotted the bar area, where a television was mounted on the wall. He walked toward it, phone still pressed to his ear, and what he saw made his blood run cold. His father stood at a podium, press cameras flashing the Pinnacle Industries logo displayed behind him. Benjamin Ashford looking nothing like the broken man Trevor had expected. He looked powerful, controlled, dangerous. The closed captioning scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "I, Benjamin Ashford, am announcing a complete restructuring of Pinnacle Industries management. We have discovered serious financial irregularities. A full investigation is underway. All parties responsible will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Trevor's vision narrowed to a tunnel. The restaurant noise faded to static. "Trevor!" Michael's voice came from far away. "Are you there?" "How much do I have?" Trevor whispered. "Cash. How much actual cash do I have access to?" "In your wallet, maybe $240. Everything else is frozen. The house, the cars, the credit cards, all of it was either company assets or under your father's name. Trevor, you have nothing." "Nothing?" The word echoed in Trevor's head as he turned slowly, looking back toward the private dining room. Through the doorway, he could see Edward and Catherine Bancroft standing gathering their things. Scarlett sat alone at the table, face-pale, hands trembling. The server hovered nearby, still holding the check. $1,200 for a dinner meant to secure $22 million. $1,200 Trevor couldn't pay. He walked back into the dining room on legs that felt disconnected from his body. Edward met his eyes, and there was no warmth there anymore. "Trevor, I think we need to postpone our discussion until your family situation is more stable. Edward, please, we'll be in touch." It was the kind of lie people told when they were never calling again. The Bancrofts left Catherine's pearls catching the light, Edward's hand protective on her back. They walked past Trevor like he was invisible, like he was nothing. Trevor stood in the empty private dining room, Scarlett staring at him with dawning horror, the server waiting patiently for payment that wouldn't come. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Hello?" His father's voice came through cold and precise, and carrying the weight of 2 years' worth of rage. "Enjoy your last supper." The line went dead. Trevor looked down at his phone at the black screen reflecting his own face. Behind him, the television still played his father's press conference on, repeat the words scrolling past, financial irregularities. Full investigation. All parties responsible. The server cleared his throat politely. "Sir, about the check." Trevor's hand went to his wallet, knowing what he'd find there. $240 in cash. Everything else, the empire he'd stolen, the life he'd built, the power he'd wielded, gone. Frozen. "Enjoy your last supper." His father's words echoed in the empty room, and Trevor finally understood. This was only the beginning. Trevor woke to his phone vibrating so violently it danced across the nightstand. He grabbed it with eyes still half closed, expecting another call from Michael, or maybe the lawyers he couldn't afford anymore. Instead, the screen was a cascade of notifications, an endless scroll of missed calls and text messages and social media alerts that just kept coming. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, and counting. He sat up, heart already pounding, and opened his social media feed. Justice for Benjamin was trending. Number 1, nationwide. 2 million mentions in the last 6 hours. His hands started shaking as he scrolled through the posts. The first one that appeared had been shared 93,000 times. It was a photograph, a medical record slightly blurry but perfectly legible. Piedmont Hospital patient, Scarlett Monroe, Ashford. Date, October 18th. Diagnosis, spontaneous miscarriage due to DNP-2,4-dinitrophenol consumption. Emergency DNC procedure performed. Notes, patient admitted to taking a legal weight loss supplement. Fetal tissue showed signs of drug toxicity. Patient counseled on dangers of DNP use. Trevor read it once, twice, 3 times each word sinking in like a blade. October 18th. Scarlett's fall down the stairs had been October 20th. 2 days later, the baby had already been gone, already lost to whatever poison she'd been putting in her body to stay thin. And she'd thrown herself down those stairs anyway, blamed his father, anyway sent an innocent man to prison anyway. His vision blurred. He kept scrolling. The comments were vicious, righteous, spreading like wildfire across every platform. She lied. The baby was already dead. Benjamin Ashford is innocent. This woman sent an innocent man to prison for 2 years for a crime that never happened. Trevor Ashford helped frame his own father. Disgusting. Justice for Benjamin. That grieving mother act at the trial. All fake. She killed her own baby with diet pills, then blamed a 70-year-old man. I hope they both rot in prison. Benjamin deserves everything they took from him. 2 million people, all of them angry, all of them knowing. Trevor's phone rang again, a journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He declined it. Another call, CNN this time. Declined. Fox News, MSNBC. The calls kept coming like punches. He threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor screen, cracking. Trevor! Scarlett appeared in the bedroom doorway wearing one of his old t-shirts, her hair messy from sleep. What's wrong? Why are people calling so early? He stared at her. This woman he'd married 3 years ago. This woman he'd thought he loved. This woman who'd stood in a courtroom and cried about losing a baby, while knowing that the baby had died because of her own choices 2 days before the incident. Show me your phone, he said, voice flat. What, your phone? Now. She pulled it from her pocket, unlocked it, handed it over with a confused expression that might have been convincing if he didn't know better now. Her social media was even worse. Death threats, hundreds of them. Her comment sections were so vicious, the platforms had started automatically hiding them. Someone had found photos of her from 2 years ago and circled her flat stomach in red. She wasn't even showing yet. The baby was barely formed, and she killed it with diet pills. Trevor handed the phone back. The medical records leaked. Piedmont Hospital, October 18th. The blood drained from Scarlett's face so fast, he thought she might faint. Everyone knows, Trevor continued, his voice eerily calm. 2 million people and counting. They know the baby was already dead before you fell. They know you lied. They know I helped you. Trevor, was it real? He stood walking toward her. Any of it? Or was it all calculated? The medical records, Scarlett. Were they real? She backed up a step, and he saw it in her eyes. Guilt, panic. The truth she'd buried for 2 years. He pulled his shattered phone from where it had fallen, dialed with shaking hands. Dr. Matthews picked up on the 3rd ring. Trevor, I've been trying to reach you. The medical records. October 18th, Piedmont Hospital. Are they real? Silence. Then, yes, a nurse leaked them. She's been fired, but yes, they're authentic. Trevor's legs gave out. He sat on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to his ear. She miscarried before the fall. 2 days before, Dr. Matthews confirmed quietly. The DNP, it's an industrial chemical, Trevor. People use it for rapid weight loss. It's incredibly dangerous, especially during pregnancy. The fetus couldn't survive that kind of toxicity. Trevor ended the call. Scarlett was crying now, mascara running down her face in black streaks. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. The baby was already gone, and I thought I saw an opportunity, and You destroyed my father, Trevor whispered. You sent him to prison for 2 years for a crime that never happened. For a baby you killed yourself. We would have been free. Her voice rose desperate. The company, the money, everything, we could have had it all. So this was the plan from the beginning. Marry me, wait for an opportunity, frame my father. No, I loved you, I do love you. She grabbed his arms, nails digging in. The miscarriage wasn't planned, but when it happened, when I realized what we could do. Trevor, you wanted the company. You told me 100 times your father would never retire, never let go. I gave you what you wanted. I gave us everything. He pulled away from her like she was toxic. You gave me nothing. You made me destroy the only parent I had left for a lie. Don't act like this is about justice. Scarlett's tears turned to rage. You wanted Pinnacle Industries. You talked about it constantly. How your father wouldn't listen to your ideas, how he treated you like a child, how you deserved to run things. I just gave you the excuse, the method, but the desire. That was all you, Trevor. The words hit like a physical blow because they were true. He had wanted the company, had resented his father's control, his refusal to step aside, had fantasized about taking over, about proving he was better, smarter, more modern. But he'd never wanted this. Had he? His phone still somehow functional, despite the cracked screen buzzed with another notification. He picked it up. The social media feeds were exploding with new posts, shares multiplying by the second. Video clips from his father's press conference yesterday side by side with Scarlett's tearful testimony from the trial. People dissecting every word, every expression, calling for investigations, for charges for justice. His own face appeared in the dozens of posts. Screenshots from news coverage, photos from the society pages all tagged with, "Gosh, justice for Benjamin," and worse things. Much worse things. Outside car doors slammed, multiple car doors. Trevor walked to the window and looked down at the Budget Inn parking lot. 3 news vans had pulled up satellite dishes extending toward the gray morning sky. Reporters climbing out, cameramen checking equipment, a small crowd already gathering. Someone in the crowd pointed up at their window. Scarlett appeared beside him, still crying, mascara streaked. What do we do? Trevor watched the reporters setting up, watched the crowd growing, watched his entire life unraveling in real time on a cracked phone screen and a cheap motel parking lot. I don't know, he whispered. And for the first time in 2 years, that was the absolute truth. The gates of the Buckhead estate stood open at 3 in the afternoon. Benjamin Ashford walked through them, flanked by 2 police officers, a court official, and a moving truck idling behind. Trevor appeared on the front steps barefoot, wearing yesterday's wrinkled clothes. His face was haggard, unshaven. What the hell is this? The court official stepped forward, opening his leather portfolio. Mr. Trevor Ashford, I'm serving you with immediate eviction. This property is owned solely by Benjamin Ashford, acquired prior to marriage. You have no legal right to be here. Trevor's eyes went wild. This is my house. This is my house, Benjamin said, his voice cold as winter. You've been squatting here, sleeping in my bed. You were a guest who became a thief. Scarlett rushed out behind Trevor, her hair uncombed, face pale without makeup. She looked nothing like the polished society wife from yesterday. You can't do this. This property is not marital assets, the court official said. It belongs to one person, and that person has requested your immediate removal. Benjamin looked at Scarlett with cold assessment. You're not a lady. You never were. You're a parasite who found a weak host. Her face flushed red. You self-righteous boss, Officer Anderson, Benjamin said quietly. Please escort them inside to collect personal belongings. 30 minutes. The officer nodded. Personal belongings only. Nothing purchased with company funds. Trevor's hands clenched into fists. I'm not leaving. Then you'll be arrested for trespassing, Benjamin said simply. Your choice. The reality hit Trevor all at once. His shoulders sagged. Dad, please. Can we talk about this? We're past talking. I'm your son. No, Benjamin said, and the word carried the weight of 730 days in a cell. You stopped being my son when you chose her lies over my freedom, when you let me rot for a crime that never happened. Scarlett grabbed Trevor's arm. Let's just get our things. They turned toward the house, but the sound of a car engine made everyone look toward the driveway. A black BMW pulled through the gates. Benjamin recognized it before the driver's door opened. Rebecca stepped out wearing a navy suit and sunglasses, her movements composed, professional. Trevor's face transformed. Hope flickered there, desperate and raw. Rebecca? Thank God. Tell him this is crazy. Rebecca walked past him as if he were invisible. Didn't slow, didn't acknowledge, didn't turn her head. Just kept walking toward Benjamin. Trevor stood frozen, his outstretched hand falling slowly to his side. Rebecca stopped in front of Benjamin, removing her sunglasses. Her face was carefully neutral, but Benjamin could see the tension in her jaw. "Dad," she said, her voice carrying for everyone to hear. "Please, I'm begging you. He's still your son. Can't we handle this privately away from the police?" Benjamin studied her face. She looked cold, distant, just as she had in the prison visitation room. But her hands, he noticed her hands were trembling, slightly held rigid at her sides. "Don't interfere in this, Rebecca," he said quietly. She held his gaze for a moment, something unreadable passing behind her eyes. Then she turned toward Trevor, her expression shifting to pity. "I'm sorry, Trevor," she said, voice softer but still carrying. "I tried. I really did. But you chose Scarlett. You chose the lies. You chose to destroy our father for money, and now you have to live with those choices." "Rebecca, please," Trevor's voice cracked. "You're my sister. I can't watch this anymore," she said. "I'm sorry." She walked back toward her BMW, movements controlled. But as she passed Benjamin just for 1 second, so brief the cameras wouldn't catch it, their eyes met. And Benjamin saw it. The slight moisture there quickly blinked away, the fractional tightening around her mouth. The message, "I'm still here. Trust me." Then she was past him, sliding into her BMW, door closing with a solid thunk. The car pulled away, leaving Trevor looking like she'd physically struck him. "Time's up," Officer Anderson said from the doorway. Trevor and Scarlett emerged with 3 suitcases. 3 suitcases to show for 2 years in a mansion. Everything else, designer clothes bought with company cards, jewelry purchased with embezzled funds, all stayed behind. The moving truck's workers began carrying out Benjamin's belongings. Photographs of Elizabeth, his books, personal papers, all being restored while Trevor's reign was erased. Trevor stood at the driveway's end, 3 suitcases at his feet, Scarlett beside him, shell-shocked. The gates began to close, wrought iron moving with mechanical precision. Trevor's eyes met Benjamin's one last time through the narrowing gap. Benjamin saw everything there, rage, disbelief, desperation, and underneath it all, the first genuine flicker of understanding. His son was finally beginning to comprehend what he'd done, what he'd lost, what could never be recovered. The gates locked with a solid clang. Benjamin turned and walked into his house, his home. The place Elizabeth had decorated where they'd raised their children, where he'd built a life before Trevor tried to steal it. Behind him, through the gates, news vans were already pulling up. Cameras pointing at Trevor and Scarlett, standing with their suitcases homeless and exposed. By tonight, every news station in Atlanta would show this footage. By tomorrow, it would be nationwide. Trevor Ashford evicted from his own home. The man who'd sent his father to prison, now standing on a sidewalk with everything he owned in 3 suitcases. Justice Benjamin thought sometimes looked exactly like this. 3 days later, the Budget Inn on the south side of Atlanta smelled like mildew and broken dreams. Trevor sat on the edge of a sagging mattress, counting bills for the 4th time that hour. $240, 4 20s, 8 10s, 6 5s, and 10 1s spread across a cigarette-burn comforter. That was everything. Everything they had left after 2 years of living like royalty. The air conditioner had died sometime yesterday, and the temperature in the room had climbed to 90 degrees. Sweat dripped down Trevor's back, soaking through the same shirt he'd been wearing for 3 days. The same shirt he'd worn to that disastrous dinner at Bones, the last nice meal he'd probably ever have. Scarlett emerged from the bathroom, her face blotchy, her hair limp with humidity. "I can't live like this. There are roaches. I saw 3 roaches, Trevor." He looked up at her. This woman he'd destroyed his life for, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "Then leave." "What?" "You heard me. If you can't handle it, leave. Go back to wherever you came from. Find another mark." Her face flushed red. "How dare you? How dare I?" Trevor laughed sharp and bitter. "You lied about our baby. You sent my father to prison for a crime that never happened. You destroyed my entire family for money we don't even have anymore. And now you're complaining about roaches. I did it for us." Her voice rose shrill in the cramped room. "You wanted that company? You talked about it constantly, how your father wouldn't retire, how he treated you like a child, how you deserved to run Pinnacle. I gave you what you wanted. You gave me nothing." Trevor stood the bills scattering from his lap. "You lied. The baby was already dead. You killed it yourself with those damn diet pills, and then you blame my father." "Because you were too weak to take what was yours," Scarlett screamed. You would have waited forever playing the dutiful son, never standing up to him. I did what you were too cowardly to do. Oh, the words hung in the stale air between them. Trevor stared at her, really looked at her for the first time in maybe ever. The woman he'd thought he loved, the woman he'd chosen over his father, over his family, over everything. She was a stranger, had always been a stranger. Get out, he said quietly. What? Get out. I can't look at you anymore. Scarlett's laugh was ugly cruel. Where am I supposed to go? We have $240 and a motel room that costs $50 a night. In 4 days, we'll both be on the street. I don't care. Just go. She grabbed her purse, what was left of her makeup, the few clothes she'd managed to stuff into her suitcase. You're pathetic. You know that your father is stronger than you'll ever be. At least he had the spine to fight back. The door slammed behind her, leaving Trevor alone in the humid silence. He sat back down on the mattress, staring at the scattered bills. $240, maybe less after Scarlett took whatever she could grab. 4 days until eviction. No job, no prospects, no family. His phone sat on the nightstand, screen cracked from when he'd thrown it 3 days ago. He'd been avoiding this call, knowing what it would cost him, knowing it was probably useless. But he had nowhere else to turn. He picked up the phone, scrolled through his contacts until he found her name. Rebecca, his little sister. The one person who might still care. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. He was about to hang up when she answered. Hello, Trevor. Her voice was controlled, professional, cold. Gracie, he said, using the childhood nickname he hadn't said in years. His voice cracked. Please, I'm begging you. I'm your brother. Talk to Dad. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him anything. I'll do anything. Please. Silence on the other end. Then, you made your choice. Rebecca, please. You chose Scarlett over Dad. You chose money over family. You sent our father to prison for 2 years because it was convenient for you. I didn't know about the miscarriage, but you knew he was innocent. Her voice cut like a knife. Deep down, Trevor, you knew. You knew Dad would never hurt anyone, let alone a pregnant woman, but you didn't care because the lie was convenient. It gave you what you wanted. Trevor's hand clenched around the phone. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but you're my sister. You're supposed to. I was your sister. Rebecca interrupted. Past tense. That ended when you chose to destroy the only parent we had left. When you chose ambition over loyalty. When you chose to believe a woman you'd known for 3 years over a father who'd loved you for your entire life. Gracie, please. I have nothing. No money, no home, nowhere to go. Scarlett just left. I'm alone. You're not alone, Trevor. You have exactly what you gave Dad. A prison of your own making. The only difference is his had bars. Yours has roaches and a broken air conditioner, and the knowledge that you did this to yourself. But you're my little sister. I was your little sister. Before you betrayed everything our family stood for, before you chose a liar over your own father, before you proved that blood means nothing to you. Her voice softened slightly, but not with warmth, with something sadder. I tried to warn you, Trevor, at the prison, at the house. I gave you chances to stop, to think, to choose differently. But you didn't. You chose this path. Now you have to walk it. Rebecca, wait. Goodbye, Trevor. The line went dead. Trevor sat holding the phone, staring at the blank screen, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like insects. In the corner, he noticed Scarlett's makeup bag. She'd left it behind in her rage, the expensive cosmetics and brushes she'd bought with his father's money. Evidence of the life they'd stolen and lost. The faucet in the bathroom dripped steadily, each drop echoing in the silence. Drip, drip, drip. Counting down to homelessness, to complete destitution, to whatever came next. Trevor lay back on the stained mattress, staring at the water-damaged ceiling, and for the first time truly understood what he'd done. Not just to his father, but to himself, to his family, to everything his parents had built. He'd traded a legacy for a lie, an empire for a woman who just walked out on him, a father's love for $240 and 4 days until eviction. Outside, police sirens wailed past on the street below. To Trevor, lying in that sweltering room, with nothing and no one, they sounded like funeral bells tolling his own death. The death of Trevor Ashford, heir to Pinnacle Industries. All that remained was the wreckage. 1 week after the eviction, Benjamin sat at the head of the conference table on the 45th floor of One Atlantic Center. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Atlanta's skyline, the morning sun casting long shadows across polished mahogany. 8 board members filled the chairs along both sides. Michael Harris, the CFO, looked uncomfortable. The other seasoned executives who'd watched Trevor's brief reign with varying degrees of concern sat with folders, open expressions, grave. Christopher Wade stood behind Benjamin's right shoulder laptop, open ready. "Gentlemen, ladies." Benjamin began, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had built Pinnacle Industries from nothing. "Thank you for convening on such short notice. What you're about to see will explain everything." Christopher clicked a button. The wall-mounted screen illuminated with a presentation titled Financial Analysis, October 2023, Present. The first slide made several board members inhale sharply. Revenue down 40%, operating debt up 200%, projected insolvency 6 months. "This is Pinnacle's current state," Benjamin said quietly. 2 years under my son's leadership. 2 years of what he called modernization and growth. 2 years of systematic destruction. The next slide appeared. Bank transfers, dozens of them, highlighted in red. Recipient Monroe Consulting LLC total, transferred $2,700,000. Monroe Consulting. Benjamin continued. A shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, supposedly for strategic consulting services. Christopher, tell them who owns Monroe Consulting. Christopher's voice was clear, precise. The Scarlett Monroe Ashford, Trevor Ashford's wife. The company was registered 3 days after Benjamin Ashford's conviction. Every transfer occurred while Benjamin was incarcerated and unable to oversee company finances. One of the board members, a woman named Patricia Williams, who'd been with Pinnacle for 15 years, leaned forward. He embezzled $2.7 million through his wife's shell company. That's the conservative estimate, Christopher said. We're still tracing additional transfers through secondary accounts. The boardroom door suddenly slammed open. Trevor stumbled in and several people gasped. He looked nothing like the polished CEO who'd sat in this room a week ago. He wore jeans, wrinkle-stained jeans, and a t-shirt that had seen better days. His face was unshaven hair, uncombed eyes wild with desperation and rage. "This meeting is invalid," his voice cracked too loud in the professional space. "I'm still the legal CEO. You can't hold board meetings without me." Benjamin didn't stand, didn't even turn his chair, just looked at his son with the kind of cold assessment reserved for strangers. "You're nothing," Benjamin said quietly. "You're a thief who wore a suit for 2 years, but underneath you were always nothing. I built this company." "You destroyed it," Benjamin interrupted. "Every number on that screen is your legacy. Debt, loss, embezzlement. That's what you built." Trevor lurched forward, grabbing the edge of the conference table. "You can't do this. I'm your son." "That you stopped being my son in a prison visitation room when you demanded I sign away $4 million. Benjamin's voice never rose, never wavered. "You're just Trevor now. A criminal who's about to face consequences." Christopher stepped forward, his voice carrying legal authority. "Mr. Trevor Ashford, you are hereby notified that the United States Attorney's Office is preparing federal charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to retain counsel, though, given your current financial situation." "Shut up," Trevor screamed. "You're nobody. You're just his lawyer." "I'm the lawyer with evidence of your crimes," Christopher said calmly. 2 years' worth. Every transfer, every forged signature, every lie. Trevor's face had gone from red to pale. He looked around the table, searching for allies, for sympathy, for anyone who might defend him. He found nothing but cold professional judgment. Benjamin stood slowly, placing both hands on the table. "As the holder of 70% voting shares of Pinnacle Industries, I move to remove Trevor Ashford from his position as CEO and terminate his employment for gross misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and criminal activity." Trevor's laugh was desperate, unhinged. 70%. You need 51%. That's standard. You can't remove me alone. "I have 70%, Benjamin said. "But let's make this unanimous. Christopher, please invite our final board member." Trevor's face went blank. Final board member. "There are only 8 board seats. They're all here." 9 seats, Benjamin corrected. "There have always been 9. One has simply been dormant for the past 2 years. Confusion rippled through the room. Even the seated board members exchanged glances. Patricia Williams frowned. Benjamin, the ninth seat, was Elizabeth's. After she passed, we never filled it. Yes, we didn't need to fill it, Benjamin said. It was already filled, by Elizabeth's designated heir per her trust and will. A seat held in reserve until the heir reached the age of 25 and met the experience qualifications outlined in the company bylaws. Trevor's eyes went wide. No, that's not possible. Rebecca is only... He stopped. Rebecca turned 25 last month and has been employed in the financial sector for 3 years, Benjamin added, meeting all bylaw requirements. Christopher walked to the boardroom door and opened it. The sound of footsteps echoed in the suddenly silent room. Trevor turned his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror watching the door as those footsteps grew closer. Benjamin watched his son's face and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This moment, this precise moment, was what justice looked like. The footsteps reached the doorway. Trevor's mouth opened, no sound came out, and Benjamin thought for the first time in 741 days that perhaps the world could still be set right.
Before we go any further, I need you to answer one question. Do you think the person about to walk into that room is an ally or the final betrayer? Leave your prediction in the comments right now, because in just a few moments, everything you believe may collapse. And a quick note, the next part of this story includes some fictionalized elements added for dramatic and educational purposes. If this isn't for you, you're free to stop watching here.
Rebecca Ashford stepped through the doorway. She wore a white power suit, crisp and immaculate, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. A leather briefcase hung from her left hand. Every step was purposeful, measured the click of her heels against marble announcing her arrival like a drum beat. Trevor's face cycled through emotions in rapid succession. Confusion first. Why was she here? Then relief flooding his features with desperate hope. Rebecca! Thank God. Tell them this is insane. Rebecca walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture. Didn't slow, didn't acknowledge, didn't even glance in his direction. She moved to the empty ninth chair, the seat at Benjamin's right hand, and sat down with perfect posture, placing her briefcase on the table with a deliberate click. Benjamin's voice carried across the boardroom, formal and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce Rebecca Ashford, holder of 30% of Pinnacle Industries voting shares inherited through Elizabeth Ashford's trust, the ninth and final board member. Trevor staggered backward like he'd been physically struck. What 30% Mom's shares went to me, Rebecca said, her voice cold and professional. Mother's will was very specific, Trevor. You would inherit your portion only after proving yourself capable of ethical leadership. She paused, letting that sink in. You failed that test. The color drained from Trevor's face. But you were helping me. You stood beside me. For 2 years, Rebecca interrupted, I documented everything. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged invoice, every lie you told, every crime you committed. Her hand went to her briefcase, extracting a thick folder. She slid it across the table to Christopher, who connected a USB drive to his laptop. The wall screen illuminated with a new presentation. Evidence log, October 2023, October 2025, compiled by Rebecca Ashford. When I stood in that prison visitation room, Rebecca continued, her voice steady despite the tremor Benjamin could see in her jaw, and called Dad unstable. When I attended your dinners with investors, when I smiled at Scarlett and played the supportive sister, I was gathering everything. The screen changed. Bank records, wire transfers, email chains. Judge Charles Winters received $150,000 source Monroe Consulting, LLC. Date 3 days before Benjamin Ashford's trial. You bribed the judge, Rebecca said, her voice flat. $150,000 to ensure Dad's conviction. Bonda Secure Tech Solutions received $50. 00 Purpose Camera System malfunction. October 20th. Contact. Verified through email correspondence. You paid the security company to disable the cameras that would have proven Scarlett through. Herself down those stairs. More slides. Shell companies. Forged signatures. Embezzlement trails leading through 6 different accounts. Trevor's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Rebecca, he finally whispered, you've been working with Dad this whole time. I've been working for justice, she corrected, her voice cracking slightly. For 2 years I stood beside you and pretended to believe your lies. I ate dinner with Scarlett and smiled while she talked about the baby she'd killed herself. I watched you steal Dad's company, his money, his freedom, and I documented every single moment of it. She stood abruptly, hands braced on the table, finally looking directly at Trevor. Her eyes were dry but furious, 2 years of suppressed rage finally breaking through that perfect professional mask. "Do you have any idea what that cost me?" Her voice rose no longer, cold, no longer controlled. "Pretending to be on your side, pretending I didn't care that our father was rotting in a cell for a crime that never happened. I had to look him in the eye during visitation and tell him to sign. Away $4 million. I had to watch him suffer and not show anything, not one crack in my performance, because if you suspected for 1 second, everything would have been lost. Rebecca, I'm your brother. You were my brother." She slammed her hand on the table, and several board members flinched. "That person died the day you chose to believe Scarlett's lies over Dad's character. The day you decided money was worth more than family. The day you sent an innocent man to prison because it was convenient." Trevor took a step toward her hand outstretched. "I made a mistake. I know that now. But we're family. Blood. That has to mean something." "It means nothing." Rebecca's voice broke, tears finally spilling over, despite her attempts to maintain control. "You had everything, Trevor. A father who built an empire and wanted to share it with you. A mother who loved you unconditionally. A sister who looked up to you. You had a legacy, a family, a future, but it wasn't enough. You couldn't wait. You couldn't be patient. You had to take it all right now, no matter who you destroyed." She wiped her eyes angrily, straightening her shoulders, rebuilding her composure brick by brick. "I vote in favor of removing Trevor Ashford from his position as CEO and proceeding with criminal prosecution." Benjamin's voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. "All those in favor." 8 hands rose around the table. Christopher's hand rose as well, though he wasn't a voting member. 9-0, Benjamin said. "The motion passes unanimously. Trevor Ashford is hereby removed from all positions within Pinnacle Industries, effective immediately." He pressed a button on the phone console. "Security, please escort Mr. Ashford from the building." 2 security guards entered both men. Trevor had probably walked past 100 times without noticing. They approached him with professional neutrality. "This can't be happening," Trevor whispered, looking around the room wildly. "Rebecca, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please." Rebecca had turned her chair toward the window, her back to him, shoulders trembling with suppressed sobs she wouldn't let him see. "Rebecca." Trevor's voice cracked as the guards took his arms. "Please!" The boardroom door closed behind them, cutting off his desperate pleas. The silence that followed was profound. Patricia Williams cleared her throat gently. "If there's no further business, I believe we should adjourn." The board members gathered their things and filed out quietly, several casting sympathetic glances at Rebecca's rigid back. Christopher nodded to Benjamin and followed them out, closing the door behind him. Benjamin stood slowly and walked to his daughter's chair. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Rebecca's control shattered. She collapsed forward, face in her hands, and sobbed great wrenching cries that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside. 2 years of maintaining perfect composure, of hiding every emotion, of playing a role that required her to betray everything she felt. All of it came pouring out in waves of grief and exhaustion and relief. "I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Shh." Benjamin pulled her up and wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he had when she was small and the world was simple. "I know. I always knew." 2 years, she choked out against his shoulder. 2 years of pretending I didn't love you, of standing beside him and acting like you deserved what happened. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I couldn't risk it. "You saved me," Benjamin said quietly, his own eyes wet now. "You sacrificed everything. Your relationship with your brother, your peace of mind, 2 years of your life. You stood in that prison and played a role that must have killed you, and you did it perfectly." "I hated myself," she whispered. "Every time I saw you through that glass, every time I had to pretend you were the bravest person I've ever known." Benjamin interrupted, pulling back to look at her tear-stained face. "Braver than any soldier, any hero. You fought a war no one could see, and you won." Rebecca buried her face in his shoulder again, her whole body shaking. "I missed you. I missed my dad. I'm here now, Benjamin said, his voice rough with emotion. And I'm never letting go again. They stood there in the empty boardroom, 45 stories above Atlanta, father and daughter finally reunited after 2 years of carefully orchestrated deception. The city spread out beneath them, indifferent to their pain, indifferent to their triumph. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. Rebecca had come home. 3 days after the boardroom, Benjamin and Rebecca sat in the St. Regis penthouse as evening settled over Atlanta. The city lights stretched to the horizon, but neither of them noticed the view. Rebecca curled in an armchair, still looking exhausted despite 3 days of rest. The cost of 2 years maintaining that perfect mask showed in the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. Benjamin sat across from her, a glass of bourbon untouched on the table between them. He'd waited 3 days to ask, giving her time to recover, to breathe, to start healing. But now he needed to understand. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Everything you did, all of it." Rebecca looked down at her hands. "Where do I start?" "The beginning." She took a breath. "The first dinner, 3 weeks after you were convicted. Trevor invited me to celebrate his promotion to CEO. I sat there at that table, the same table where we used to have family dinners, and watched him and Scarlett mock you, called you unstable, said you'd always been difficult. I smiled and nodded and agreed." Her voice cracked. "Then I went to the bathroom and cried until I threw up." Benjamin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Just listened. I knew then that I couldn't fight them openly. Trevor controlled everything: the company, the lawyers, the narrative. So I decided to become invisible, the supportive sister who believed his lies. And I started documenting. 2 in the morning, she continued, eyes distant with memory. That's when I'd copy files. Trevor kept everything in his home office. I'd wait until he and Scarlett were asleep, then sneak in with a flash drive. One night, Scarlett came downstairs for water. I heard her footsteps and barely had time to hide the USB in my pocket. She stood in the hallway for 5 minutes while my heart tried to beat out of my chest. "How did you get information to me?" Benjamin asked. "The flash drive Margaret received. Henry Miller," Rebecca said. "Do you remember him?" "Your cellmate." Benjamin's eyes widened. "Henry was working for you. Retired private investigator. I hired him 6 months before your trial, when I knew something was wrong but couldn't prove it yet. He's 70 years old and has a record for securities fraud from 20 years ago. I paid him $50,000 to get arrested on a probation violation and request placement at Georgia State Prison." She met her father's eyes. "He made sure he became your cellmate. Every message I sent, every update, every piece of evidence, it went through Henry." "My God," Benjamin whispered. "The whole time, he was my eyes and ears, making sure you were safe, passing encrypted messages." Rebecca's voice softened. "The day before your release, I sent him one final message through a guard we'd bribed. Tell him I love him. Tell him to trust what comes next." Benjamin's throat tightened. "I thought I was alone in there." "You were never alone, Dad. Not for one single day." "The prison visitation," Benjamin said. "When you told me to sign," Rebecca's face crumpled slightly. "I practiced that speech for 2 weeks, in front of mirrors in my car everywhere. I needed my voice to sound cold, convinced. Like I'd completely given up on you." She wiped her eyes. "But when I saw your face through that glass, saw how much I was hurting you, I almost broke. I wanted to scream that it was an act that I was fighting for you. Instead, I said goodbye and walked away. Then I sat in my car for an hour and sobbed." "I knew," Benjamin said quietly. "Not consciously, maybe, but something in the way you said goodbye, not see you tomorrow. Just goodbye. Like you were saying goodbye to the pretense." Rebecca nodded. "I was terrified you'd see through it, that Trevor would notice, that I'd slip for just 1 second and ruin everything." "Marcus Brown," Benjamin said. "How did you find him?" 3 months of investigation. Scarlett was careful, but not careful enough. She'd transfer money to a Portland account every month. Small amounts, but consistent. I hired another private investigator in Oregon, and he tracked it to Marcus Brown, married to Scarlett for 8 years. They have a daughter, Lily. She's 6 years old. You saw them. I flew to Portland, watched them at a park. Lily was on the swings and Marcus was pushing her. Scarlett's real family. The one she was planning to return to after she stole everything from us. Rebecca's voice hardened. That's when I knew we had her completely. Bigamy, federal crime, the perfect final piece. Benjamin leaned forward. Henry Miller, all this time he was your operative. He's a good man, Rebecca said. He did it because he believed in justice. And because I paid him well enough to retire comfortably afterward. A smile ghosted across Benjamin's face. The R on the envelope. I suspected, but I couldn't be sure. I couldn't contact you directly. Too dangerous. If Trevor's lawyers found any connection between us, any hint I was helping you, they could have used it against us both. Everything had to go through intermediaries. Margaret, Christopher, Henry. At Christopher's name, Rebecca's cheeks flushed slightly. Benjamin noticed. Christopher Wade. How did he become involved? I approached him 2 years ago, right after your conviction. He was already making a name for himself in corporate law. I showed him the evidence I'd gathered, explained what I was planning. She paused. He believed me, took the case knowing he might not get paid for years, knowing it could damage his reputation if it failed. He just believed in doing the right thing. And now, Benjamin asked, gently noting the color still in her daughter's cheeks. Now we're... Rebecca faltered, then met his eyes. There's something there. I don't know what yet. But he stood by me through everything. Never doubted. Never questioned. Benjamin smiled properly for the first time. He's a good man. He is. The door opened and Christopher himself entered, briefcase in hand, his expression serious. Sorry to interrupt. We need to discuss trial preparation. What's happened? Benjamin asked. Trevor's hired a lawyer, public defender but competent. They're building a defense strategy and it's... Christopher hesitated, glancing at Rebecca. They're going after lineage. Rebecca went very still. Lineage. Benjamin's voice was carefully neutral. They're investigating family relationships, trying to challenge Rebecca's inheritance, her board position, her evidence. Christopher set his briefcase down. They're looking for anything that might discredit her testimony or invalidate her shares. Rebecca's hands clenched in her lap. Benjamin saw at the sudden tension the flash of fear in her eyes before she masked it. Let them look, Benjamin said, watching his daughter carefully. Rebecca's inheritance is ironclad. Elizabeth's will was explicit. Of course, Christopher agreed, but his eyes were on Rebecca, too concerned. The room felt suddenly smaller, weighted with unspoken knowledge. Benjamin looked between them, his daughter's carefully controlled expression, Christopher's worried glance. There was something here. Something Rebecca was afraid Trevor's lawyers would find. Something about lineage. 2 weeks after the boardroom, Christopher Wade's law office felt like a war room. Papers covered every surface, legal briefs stacked in towers, evidence boxes lined against the walls. Margaret Thompson sat at the conference table, reading glasses perched on her nose. Rebecca stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. Benjamin could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself, like she was bracing for impact. Christopher entered carrying a folder, his expression grim. Trevor's legal team filed their motion this morning. They found the adoption records. Rebecca went absolutely still. Benjamin's jaw tightened, but he stayed seated watching his daughter's face drain of color. Margaret pulled out a document, her voice professional but gentle. Adoption decree dated 26 years ago. Rebecca Ann Ashford, age 3. Biological parents deceased in a car accident 2 months prior. They're arguing, Christopher continued, that Rebecca has no legal standing as an heir because she's not a blood relative. Nay, they're claiming her shares should be invalidated and her testimony dismissed. Rebecca made a sound half laugh, half sob. What if they're right? What if I lose you the company because I'm not actually... Stop. Benjamin crossed to her in 3 strides. I don't care what any paper says. You are my daughter, more my daughter than Trevor ever was my son. But the shares Mom's trust? Adoption grants full legal rights identical to biological children. Margaret interrupted firmly. This motion is desperate. They have nothing else. But they'll use it in court, Christopher said. They'll paint Rebecca as an opportunist who manipulated a grieving widower to steal an inheritance. Let them try, Benjamin said coldly. Rebecca turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. I've always felt like I had to prove myself, like I had to be better, work harder to deserve being your daughter. Benjamin cupped her face in his hands. You have nothing to prove. You proved everything when you stood by me while my biological son destroyed me. Blood means nothing. Loyalty means everything. Margaret leaned forward. The jury needs to hear this, not the legal argument, the emotional truth. Benjamin, You need to tell them about Rebecca, about what family really means." Benjamin guided Rebecca to a chair and sat beside her. 26 years ago, your mother and I had been trying to have children for 5 years. Every doctor, every treatment, nothing worked. Elizabeth was devastated. Rebecca listened, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We decided to adopt. The agency called about a little girl whose parents had died in a car accident, drunk driver. She was 3 years old, and she hadn't spoken a single word since witnessing the crash. I remember," Rebecca whispered, "being silent, like my voice was locked inside. Elizabeth brought you home. You were so small, so scared. You wouldn't let anyone touch you except her. She'd hold you every night singing lullabies. 6 months went by, not one word." Benjamin's voice roughened with emotion. "Then one morning you looked at Elizabeth and said, 'Mama,' just that one word. Elizabeth cried for an hour. Rebecca was crying too, now silent tears tracking down her face. 6 months later, Elizabeth got pregnant. The doctors called it a miracle after 5 years of trying. Suddenly she was carrying Trevor. We were overjoyed. But Rebecca," his hand found hers. "You were already our daughter, already loved, already ours. Trevor's birth didn't change that." "Trevor knew?" Rebecca asked. "No. Elizabeth wanted to wait until you were both adults, but she died before—" Benjamin's voice broke. "She died, and I kept the secret because I thought it didn't matter." "It doesn't!" Rebecca said fiercely. "You're my father. Mom was my mother. That's all that matters." "Then why," Benjamin asked gently, "have you been carrying this fear?" Rebecca looked down at their joined hands. "Because I knew. Deep down, I always knew. Little things, no baby pictures before age 3, the way people said, I looked like Mom, but never you. I knew, even though no one said it, and I thought," her voice broke, "I thought maybe that's why Trevor got everything. Why he was groomed to run the company while I was encouraged to find my own path. Because he was real family, and I was—" "You were loved," Benjamin interrupted fiercely. "Every bit as much as he was, more because you deserved it. Trevor's failure wasn't about blood. It was about character. And your courage, your loyalty, your sacrifice. That wasn't about proving you belonged. That was about being who you are." Margaret cleared her throat. This is what the jury needs to hear, not technicalities. This story." Christopher nodded. "Trevor's lawyers think they've found a weapon. They don't realize they've handed us the narrative that will destroy their case." "How?" Rebecca asked. "Because," Margaret said, "they're going to argue that adoption doesn't count. That blood is all that matters. And then Benjamin is going to explain exactly what family means, what loyalty means. He's going to compare you, the adopted daughter, who sacrificed 2 years, to save him, to Trevor, the biological son, who sent him to prison for money." Christopher added, "They're walking into a trap of their own making." Benjamin stood pacing. "When do they plan to raise this? Opening arguments?" Christopher said. "They'll try to discredit Rebecca before she testifies. Then we address it head on," Benjamin decided. "No hiding, no shame. We own it completely. Rebecca's adoption becomes the centerpiece of our case, proof that blood means nothing when weighed against character." He turned to his daughter. "Are you ready? It's going to be public. Everyone will know." Rebecca stood squaring her shoulders. Benjamin saw the warrior who'd fought in silence for 2 years. "Let them know. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud to be your daughter. And if Trevor's lawyers want to make this about blood versus loyalty, then let's show them exactly what matters." Margaret smiled grimly. "This is going to backfire spectacularly." Christopher gathered his papers. "Trial starts in 1 week. We need to prepare Benjamin's testimony. Make it personal, emotional, undeniable." Benjamin looked at his daughter, the one who'd sacrificed everything, who'd stood beside him when his biological son had betrayed him, who'd proven that family was built on loyalty, not genetics. "Then let's give them a lesson," he said, "in what family really means." Trevor's lawyers had just made their fatal mistake. They'd tried to use adoption as a weapon, not realizing it was Benjamin's greatest strength. The contrast would be undeniable, the adopted daughter who'd given up 2 years of her life to save her father versus the biological son who'd sent that father to prison for money. Blood versus loyalty, genetics versus character. And Benjamin knew exactly which side would win. 3 months after the boardroom meeting, January brought freezing rain to Atlanta. The Fulton County Courthouse steps were slick with ice, but that hadn't stopped the crowd. Benjamin and Rebecca climbed those steps hand in hand, cameras flashing like lightning. Reporters shouted questions lost in the chaos. Benjamin kept his eyes forward, his grip steady. The district attorney had fast-tracked the case. With 2 years of documented evidence and intense public scrutiny, there was no reason to delay justice any longer. Inside the courthouse was warm, but the atmosphere was cold. Christopher and Margaret waited in the hallway, briefcases full of evidence. "Ready?" Christopher asked. Benjamin looked at Rebecca, pale but composed in her navy suit, hair pulled back. She looked like Elizabeth had the day they'd met. "Ready?" Benjamin said. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with journalists and observers who'd followed the story since Benjamin's release. The gallery buzzed with whispers that fell silent when the bailiff called for order. Benjamin and Rebecca took seats in the front row behind the prosecution table. Christopher and Margaret sat beside them. Across the aisle, 2 public defenders shuffled papers, expressions grim. Then the side door opened and guards brought in the defendants. Trevor appeared first in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He'd lost 20 pounds, hair grown out, and greasy dark circles shadowing his eyes. He looked nothing like the confident CEO from 3 months ago. He shuffled to the defense table, chains rattling. Scarlett came next, also in orange, also cuffed. She'd aged years, face drawn, no makeup, hair, and a lifeless ponytail. She sat at a separate defense table. Her lawyer had wisely severed her case, though both trials ran together. They didn't look at each other. Benjamin watched his son scan the courtroom, watched his eyes find them. Something flickered across Trevor's face. Shame, maybe. Then he looked away. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison entered, a black woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for efficiency. She was nothing like Judge Winters. No corruption, just law. She surveyed the courtroom and nodded to the prosecution. "The state may proceed." The prosecutor stood Jessica Smith, mid-40s, track record of winning difficult cases. She approached the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice clear and strong, "this case is about greed, a son who couldn't wait for his inheritance, a woman who saw opportunity and seized it with lies, a 71-year-old man who spent 2 years in prison for a crime he never committed." She gestured toward the defendants. "They embezzled $2.7 million. They bribed a judge. They paid a security company to disable cameras that would have proven Scarlett threw herself downstairs after her baby had already died from illegal diet pills." Several jurors' eyes widened. "Benjamin Ashford lost 2 years of his life," Jessica continued. 2 years in a cell while his son stole his company and his son's wife planned to disappear to her real family, her real husband, her real child. Trevor's lawyer shot up. "Objection inflammatory." "Overruled," Judge Morrison said, calmly. "Opening arguments, counselor. You'll have your turn." Jessica continued. "The evidence will show conspiracy of breathtaking scope, and it will show the real hero." She turned toward Rebecca. "An adopted daughter who sacrificed 2 years going undercover to document every crime." Benjamin felt Rebecca's hand find his, squeezing hard. Trevor's lawyer stood, a young man, clearly overwhelmed. "My client was deceived, manipulated by Scarlett Monroe. Trevor Ashford believed his father was guilty. He acted on greed." Someone muttered loud enough to carry. Judge Morrison's gavel came down. "Order." The lawyer pressed on weakly. "Furthermore, the evidence gathered by Rebecca Ashford is suspect. She's not even a blood relative. She was adopted, and her motives—" Benjamin's hands clenched. Rebecca's grip tightened on his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Let them dig their own grave. Orchestrated this prosecution to secure an inheritance she has no legitimate claim to." Christopher stood. "Objection. Counsel is testifying, not arguing." "Sustained," Judge Morrison said sharply. "Stick to facts or sit down." The lawyer deflated, finishing weakly before sitting. The first day proceeded with Christopher presenting timeline audit shell companies, embezzlement. Each piece methodical, undeniable. The jury watched with increasing attention. Several took notes. One woman kept glancing at Trevor with visible disgust. By adjournment, the foundation was laid. Outside on the courthouse steps, Benjamin paused for the press. "Thy justice delayed," he said simply, "is not justice denied." A reporter called out, "How do you feel about your son?" Benjamin's jaw tightened. "I feel nothing. That man is not my son. My son died 2 years ago when he chose money over family." In Christopher's car, Margaret reviewed notes. "They'll attack Rebecca tomorrow, the adoption angle. They'll try to discredit her before she testifies." "Let them try," Rebecca said, but her voice trembled. Christopher checked his phone. "Development. Someone contacted me. Wants to testify." "Who?" Benjamin asked. Christopher handed him a business card. "Marcus Brown, Portland, Oregon, flying in tonight." Rebecca's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Who's Marcus Brown?" Benjamin asked. Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "Scarlett's husband, her real husband." The car went silent. "He's testifying," Margaret asked. "He insists," Christopher said. "Saw the news coverage, wants justice for his daughter." "Lily," Rebecca whispered. "She's only 6. Benjamin looked at the courthouse lights burning in windows where justice was being assembled. Marcus Brown was coming. The real husband, the real family. The final piece proving Scarlett's entire life with Trevor had been a calculated lie. "When does he testify?" Benjamin asked. "Day 3, Christopher said. "After Rebecca." The bomb was coming, and when it dropped, it would obliterate whatever defense they had left. Day 2 of the trial began with a tension so thick it felt like the courtroom itself was holding its breath. Rebecca took the witness stand wearing a navy suit, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the rail. Benjamin watched from his seat, every instinct screaming to protect her, knowing he couldn't. This was her fight now. The prosecutor, Jessica Smith, approached with a gentle expression. "Ms. Ashford, please describe your relationship with your father." Rebecca's voice was steady despite her trembling hands. "Benjamin is my father in every way that matters. He raised me, loved me, taught me right from wrong. When Trevor sent him to prison, I knew I couldn't fight openly. So I went undercover for 2 years. The jury leaned forward, captivated. "I documented everything," Rebecca continued. "Every fraudulent transaction, every lie. I attended dinners with Trevor and Scarlett and smiled while they mocked my father. I pretended to believe Dad was guilty when I knew he was innocent." "What was the hardest part?" Jessica asked. Rebecca's eyes found Benjamin's. "The prison visitation, looking him in the eye and telling him to cooperate, to sign away $4 million, knowing how much it would hurt him, knowing he might think I'd betrayed him too." "May, why did you do it?" "Because he's my father," Rebecca said simply. "Family doesn't abandon family. It was the right thing to do." Jessica nodded. "No further questions?" Trevor's lawyer stood young, nervous but determined. "Ms. Ashford, Benjamin Ashford is not your biological father, correct?" "Correct. I was adopted at age 3. So you have no blood claim to the Ashford estate. Legally I have. Answer yes or no. Do you share DNA with Benjamin Ashford?" Rebecca's voice hardened. "No. No blood relation. Yet you stand to inherit 30% of a company worth $120 million. The lawyer paced. "Isn't it true that you orchestrated this entire prosecution to eliminate the biological son and claim an inheritance you have no right to?" Benjamin's hands clenched the armrest. Margaret's hand touched his arm in warning. "That's not," Rebecca began. "You manipulated a grieving widower, played the role of dutiful daughter while plotting to destroy his real son." "Objection!" Benjamin shot to his feet, voice thundering through the courtroom. "That is a lie." Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Ashford, sit down or I will hold you in contempt." Margaret pulled him back into his seat. "Your turn is coming," she whispered urgently. The lawyer continued circling. "He took you in out of pity. He took me in out of love," Rebecca said, her voice cutting through the theatrics. "And I fought for him for 2 years because that's what daughters do for their fathers. Real fathers, not biological coincidences." The lawyer blinked, momentum broken. No further questions. Jessica stood for redirect. "Rebecca, in your own words, why did you fight for Benjamin?" Rebecca looked directly at the jury. "Because family isn't about DNA. It's about who shows up, who fights for you, who loves you when you're at your worst. Benjamin Ashford showed up for me when I was 3 years old and traumatized and silent. He's been showing up every day for 26 years. So when he needed me, I showed up for him. That's what family means." "Thank you. No further questions." Judge Morrison nodded. "The prosecution may call its next witness." Jessica Smith stood. "The state calls Benjamin Ashford." Benjamin walked to the witness stand, sworn in, and took his seat. He looked at the jury, 12 faces watching him with varying degrees of curiosity and sympathy. Jessica approached. "Mr. Ashford, tell us about Rebecca." Benjamin took a breath. This was the moment Margaret had prepared him for, the moment that would either cement their case or destroy it. "Rebecca," he began, "is the best thing that ever happened to my family." He looked at his daughter, saw her eyes already filling with tears, and continued. 26 years ago, Elizabeth and I had been trying to have children for 5 years. Every treatment failed. Elizabeth was heartbroken. We decided to adopt. The agency called about a little girl whose parents had died in a car accident. Drunk driver. She was 3 years old, and she hadn't spoken a single word since witnessing the crash. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Elizabeth brought her home. Rebecca was so small, so scared. She wouldn't let anyone touch her except Elizabeth. My wife would hold her every night singing lullabies, reading stories. 6 months went by. Not one word. Benjamin's voice roughened with emotion. Then one morning, Rebecca looked at Elizabeth and said, "Mama," just that one word. Elizabeth cried for an hour. So did I. Several jurors were already reaching for tissues. 6 months after that, Elizabeth got pregnant. The doctors called it a miracle. After 5 years of trying, suddenly she was carrying Trevor. We were overjoyed. He paused. But Rebecca was already our daughter, already loved, already ours. Trevor's birth didn't change that. He leaned forward, looking directly at the jury. For 26 years, Rebecca has been my daughter. Not my adopted daughter, my daughter. She graduated the top of her class, got her first job in New York, called me every Sunday. When Elizabeth died, Rebecca flew home and held my hand through the funeral. She's been there for every moment that mattered. His voice grew stronger, harder. Trevor is my biological son. We share DNA, and he sent me to prison for a crime I didn't commit. He stole my company, my home, my freedom. He chose money over family. He chose lies over loyalty. Rebecca doesn't share my DNA, but she sacrificed 2 years of her life to save me. She went undercover in her own family, documented crimes, gathered evidence, and stood by me when my biological son abandoned me. Benjamin stood, his hands gripping the witness box rail, and his voice filled the courtroom like thunder. "So don't you dare tell me that blood makes family. Loyalty makes family. Love makes family. Character makes family. Rebecca is more my daughter than Trevor ever was my son. And if this court cannot see that, if this jury cannot see that, then we have lost sight of what family really means." The silence that followed was absolute. Benjamin saw tears on several jurors' faces, saw the woman in the back row openly crying, saw Trevor with his head bowed, shoulders shaking, and saw Rebecca, tears streaming down her face, mouthing 2 words, "Thank you." Jessica Smith let the moment breathe before speaking. "No further questions, Your Honor." Thus, Judge Morrison looked at the defense table. Cross-examination. Trevor's lawyer stood, looked at Benjamin's face, looked at the crying jurors, and made the smartest decision of his career. "No questions, Your Honor. The witness may step down." Benjamin returned to his seat. Rebecca grabbed his hand the moment he sat squeezing so hard it hurt. Court adjourned for lunch. Outside, the press was already broadcasting Benjamin's speech. Within an hour, clips were circulating everywhere. By evening, hashtag Segor Chosen Family was trending nationwide with over 5 million mentions. Comments poured in. "This is what a real father looks like. Blood means nothing. Love means everything. I'm adopted and this made me sob. This is everything." Trevor Ashford is a biological son. Rebecca Ashford is a real daughter. There's a difference. Christopher showed them his phone in the courthouse hallway. "Benjamin, you just went viral. That speech, it's everywhere." "I don't care about viral," Benjamin said, looking at Rebecca. "I care about her knowing the truth." "I've always known, Dad," Rebecca said softly. "But thank you for telling the world." Margaret approached her, expression serious, despite the victory. "Tomorrow is day 3, Marcus Brown testifies. Are we ready for the final piece?" Christopher nodded. "He lands tonight. I'm meeting him at the hotel at 7 to prep." Benjamin looked at the courthouse behind them, at the windows where Trevor sat in a holding cell, at the world that was finally understanding what had really happened. "Then let's finish this," he said. The speech had gone viral. Public opinion had shifted entirely. And tomorrow, Marcus Brown would drop the final bomb that would destroy whatever remained of Scarlett's defense. Justice was no longer delayed. It was arriving right on schedule. Day 3 of the trial began with routine testimony about shell companies and financial fraud. The The courtroom had settled into the rhythm of technical evidence when Jessica Smith stood. Your Honor, the state has an additional witness. He arrived from Portland last night. Trevor's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection? We weren't notified of any additional witnesses. The witness came forward voluntarily after seeing news coverage, Jessica said. His testimony is directly relevant to the charges of conspiracy and fraud. Judge Morrison considered. I'll allow it, but Counselor, this is your last surprise. Jessica nodded. The state calls Marcus Brown. The courtroom doors opened. A man walked in Asian American mid-30s, wearing a simple gray suit, his face exhausted and drawn. Behind him, a lawyer escorted a small girl, maybe 6 years old, dark hair and pigtails, into the gallery seats. Scarlett's face drained of every drop of blood. Her hands began to shake violently. Trevor looked confused. Who is that? Marcus took the witness stand and was sworn in. His eyes never left Scarlett, who had gone absolutely rigid in her seat. Mr. Brown. Jessica began. What is your relationship to the defendant, Scarlett Monroe? Marcus's voice was quiet but clear. She's my wife. We've been married for 8 years. The courtroom erupted. Trevor's head snapped toward Scarlett. What? Scarlett stared at the table, trembling, saying nothing. Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. Order in this court. Jessica pulled out documents. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence marriage certificate dated 8 years ago, Portland, Oregon, joint tax returns, and she held up a birth certificate. Birth certificate for Lily Smith, age 6, mother Scarlett Smith. The documents were passed to the jury. Several gasped audibly. Trevor sat, frozen, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. Mr. Smith, Jessica continued, please tell the court about your marriage to Scarlett. Marcus took a shaky breath. We got married 8 years ago in Portland. She said her legal name was Scarlett Smith. We have a daughter, Lily. She's sitting right there. He gestured to the little girl in the gallery who waved timidly. 3 years ago, Scarlett said she got a consulting job in Atlanta. Long-term contract, good money. She'd come home once a month, sometimes less. I believed her. I trusted her. I loved her. His voice broke. I had no idea she was living another life, another marriage, another identity. Jessica displayed photographs on the courtroom screen. Scarlett and Marcus on their wedding day, both smiling. Scarlett holding baby Lily in a hospital. Family Christmas photos. A beach vacation. Birthday parties. A complete life documented in images. When did you discover the truth? Jessica asked. 2 weeks ago. I was watching the news and saw her face. My wife. Arrested. Married to another man. Accused of sending someone to prison. Marcus looked directly at Trevor. I had no idea Trevor Ashford existed. She told me she was working, consulting. I was home raising our daughter alone, sending her money when she asked, believing every lie. Trevor whispered something inaudible, his face ashen. Mr. Smith, why did you come forward? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Because she destroyed 3 families. Mine, Trevor's, Benjamin's. For what money? Our daughter asks me every night when Mommy's coming home. What am I supposed to tell her? That Mommy's a liar, a criminal, that everything we thought was real was fake. In the gallery, little Lily had started crying softly. A victim advocate put an arm around her shoulders. Marcus turned to look at Scarlett directly. Lily drew you a picture last week, a family portrait. You, me, and her. She asked when you'd be back for her birthday. His voice hardened. You were never coming back, were you? You were going to take the money and disappear, leave us both, leave all of us with nothing. Scarlett was sobbing now, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. Jessica approached the witness stand. Did you have any knowledge of the crime Scarlett committed? No, none. I thought she was a consultant, a legitimate businesswoman. I had no idea she'd framed anyone stolen, anything lied about. He stopped. About the pregnancy. I saw the trial coverage. She told Trevor she lost a baby. She had our baby 3 years ago. She killed another one with diet pills. How many lies can one person tell? No further questions. Judge Morrison looked at the defense table. Cross-examination. Scarlett's lawyer stood, took one look at Marcus's tear-stained face and the crying child in the gallery, and sat back down. No questions, Your Honor. Trevor's lawyer did the same. No questions. The witness may step down. Marcus walked past the defense table on his way out. Trevor's voice stopped him barely above a whisper. Did she ever love me? Marcus looked at Trevor. This man who'd been as deceived as he had been, who'd destroyed his own father for a woman who'd never been real. I don't think, Marcus said quietly, she ever loved any of us, just the money. He collected Lily from the gallery. As they walked toward the exit, the little girl turned back, her voice small and confused. Mommy! Scarlett's sobs grew louder. Judge Morrison called for recess. The courtroom exploded into chaos, reporters rushing for the doors, spectators talking over each other, the jury sitting, stunned. Trevor remained at the defense table, motionless, staring at nothing. Finally, he turned to Scarlett. His voice was dead hollow. Even our marriage was a lie. Everything, every single thing. Trevor, Scarlett started. Don't. Trevor's voice was barely audible. Don't say anything. There's nothing left to say. He turned away from her, and that was it. The end of whatever they'd had, whatever he'd thought they'd had. All of it revealed as fiction. Guards came to escort them back to holding cells. Trevor walked like a zombie. Scarlett could barely stand still, crying. Outside the courthouse, the news broke like a tidal wave. Bigamy bombshell Scarlett Ashford. Had secret family in Portland. Husband and 6-year-old daughter testify we thought she was working. Trevor Ashford discovers wife's 8-year marriage. Everything was a lie. Social media exploded. Within an hour, Marcus Brown's testimony was the top trending topic. Videos of little Lily crying, "Mommy," when those were going viral, breaking hearts across the country. Comments poured in. That poor man. That poor child. Scarlett destroyed 3 families for money. Trevor is a criminal, but even I feel sorry for him. His entire marriage was fake. Lily asking mommy destroyed me. This child is going to need so much therapy. Marcus Brown is the real victim here, raising a child alone while his wife committed crimes with another man. Inside Christopher's car, Rebecca was crying. That little girl, she didn't ask for any of this. That none of the children did, Benjamin said quietly, thinking of his own daughter, of the years she'd sacrificed, of the family that had been torn apart. Margaret reviewed her notes. That's it. Scarlett's defense is dead. The jury won't come back for her. And Trevor, she shook her head. Everything he thought was real just evaporated. Christopher's phone buzzed with notifications. The testimony is everywhere. Marcus Brown's question, "For what money?" That's the quote everyone's sharing. Benjamin looked back at the courthouse. Somewhere inside, his son sat in a holding cell, finally understanding the full scope of the lies he'd built his life on. Tomorrow is closing arguments, Margaret said. Then it goes to the jury. How long? Rebecca asked. With this much evidence, this much emotion. Margaret's expression was grim. Not long, maybe a day, maybe less. The bomb had dropped. Scarlett's lies were laid bare for the world to see. Trevor's last illusion had shattered into pieces, and somewhere in Portland, a 6-year-old girl was learning that her mother wasn't coming home. Not for her birthday, not ever. Justice, Benjamin thought, sometimes destroyed innocent people on its way to the guilty. But it was still justice, and it was finally arriving. The jury had deliberated for 4 hours. Benjamin sat beside Rebecca, their hands clasped. Christopher and Margaret sat behind them. The gallery was packed, journalists, observers, everyone who'd followed this story from the beginning. All rise. Judge Morrison entered and took her seat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The jury foreman stood. We have your honor. In the matter of the state versus Trevor Ashford on the charge of embezzlement, how do you find guilty? Wire fraud, guilty. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty. Bribery of a public official, guilty. Trevor sat motionless. His eyes were empty, hollow, no reaction at all. Just nothing. In the matter of the state versus Scarlett Monroe Ashford on the charge of conspiracy, guilty. Obstruction of justice, guilty. Perjury, guilty. Bigamy, guilty. Scarlett collapsed forward, sobbing. Judge Morrison let the verdicts hang before continuing. Mr. Trevor Ashford, please stand. Trevor stood slowly like a man underwater. You sent an innocent man, your own father, to prison. You embezzled millions. You bribed a judge. I sentence you to 18 years in Georgia State Prison with no parole for 12 years. Full restitution of $2.7 million. Trevor's head bowed. He said nothing. Ms. Scarlett Monroe Ashford, please stand. Scarlett could barely stand, her lawyer helping her up. You orchestrated conspiracy of breathtaking cruelty. You faked a pregnancy loss. You committed perjury. You maintained a bigamous marriage for years. Judge Morrison's voice hardened. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. Additionally, Marcus Brown has been granted full custody of Lily Smith. You are prohibited from any contact with the child until she reaches legal adulthood. No, Scarlett's voice broke. Please, my daughter. Your daughter will be better off without your influence, Judge Morrison said coldly. The child's welfare is paramount. Court officers removed the defendants. Trevor walked toward the exit without looking back. No glance at Benjamin, no acknowledgement. Just empty steps toward 18 years in the same prison where he'd sent his father. Scarlett was half-carried, still sobbing. Lily, I need to see Lily. But Lily wasn't there. Marcus had taken her home to Portland the day before. One additional matter, Judge Morrison said. Judge Charles Winters will face a separate trial for judicial corruption. The courtroom erupted in applause. Benjamin sat motionless, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, just exhaustion. Rebecca's hand squeezed his. Dad, it's over. That's when it hit him. 2 years and 741 days after being wrongly convicted, justice had finally arrived. He pulled Rebecca into his arms and cried deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. 2 years of rage and grief pouring out on the courthouse bench. It's over, she kept saying. Dad, it's over. Christopher and Margaret stepped back, giving them space. Outside on the courthouse steps, January's sun was blindingly bright. Cameras surrounded them. A reporter called out, Mr. Ashford, how do you feel? Benjamin took a breath. Justice delayed is not justice denied, but it still hurts. That was my son. I raised him, loved him. That pain doesn't go away with a verdict. He pulled Rebecca close. But this woman, this daughter, she saved me. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty makes family. She proved that for 2 years. Rebecca's composure broke. 2 years of holding herself together came pouring out in great sobs on the courthouse steps, while cameras captured everything. 2 years, Dad, she choked out. 2 years pretending to hate you, scared it wouldn't work. You gave up everything, Benjamin said, voice breaking. 2 years of your life, for me. Because you're my father, Rebecca sobbed. Because family doesn't abandon family. Christopher created a buffer. That's enough. Give them space. Margaret ushered them toward the car. 1 week later, Rebecca sat on a park bench in Piedmont Park. January cold bit through her coat, but she'd wanted neutral ground. She saw them approaching Marcus Brown walking hand in hand with Lily, who wore a pink winter coat. This meeting had been arranged through lawyers. Rebecca stood as they approached. Mr. Brown. Ms. Ashford. Marcus's expression was guarded but not hostile. Rebecca knelt to Lily's level. Hi, Lily. I'm Rebecca. The little girl looked at her with solemn eyes. You're the lady from TV, the one who helped catch my mommy. Rebecca's heart clenched. Yes. I'm sorry about what happened to your mom. Daddy says Mommy did bad things, Lily said, voice small. But I miss her. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. It's okay to miss her sweetheart. She's still your mom. Will she come home? Not for a long time, Rebecca said gently. But your daddy loves you very much. Lily nodded seriously, then wandered away to examine a bird. Rebecca stood facing Marcus. I can't fix what Scarlett did, but I want to help. She pulled out an envelope. I've established a trust fund for Lily's education, full tuition through college plus living expenses. It's anonymous, but she deserves a future that her mother's crimes can't destroy. Marcus stared at the envelope. Why would you do this? Because Lily is innocent, Rebecca said simply. She didn't choose any of this. She deserves every opportunity. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. That's incredibly kind. You're a good person, Rebecca Ashford. I'm just trying to do the right thing. They watched Lily chase the bird, her laughter bright and innocent. She's resilient, Marcus said. Kids are. She'll be okay. She has a good father, Rebecca said. That's what matters. Marcus called to Lily. Come on, sweetie, time to go. Lily ran back, grabbed her father's hand, then waved at Rebecca. Bye. Rebecca waved back, watching them walk away, a small family trying to rebuild from wreckage. She sat back down on the bench, pulling her coat tighter. Justice had been served. Trevor and Scarlett would spend years in prison. Benjamin was free, vindicated. But there were still casualties, still wounds that wouldn't fully heal, still one final confrontation left. Tomorrow, Benjamin would visit Georgia State Prison to say goodbye to his son. One last time. 1 year later, January again, Benjamin Ashford drove to Georgia State Prison, full circle. He passed through the same gates where he'd been released 741 days ago. But this time he wore an expensive suit, hair silver, but healthy. This time, he was the free man. The visitation room was exactly as he remembered. Cold lights, bolted tables, the smell of disinfectant and despair. He sat facing the plexiglass divider. The door opened. Trevor shuffled in. Orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He'd lost 30 pounds. Hair long and unkempt, face gaunt. He looked 50, not 37. They sat in silence, father and son, prisoner and free man. Roles reversed. Trevor picked up the phone. Benjamin picked up his. "Dad," Trevor's voice was hoarse. "Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't. I'm sorry, so sorry. I was greedy, weak. I destroyed everything." Trevor's eyes filled with tears. "Scarlett manipulated me, but that's not an excuse. I knew you were innocent. Deep down I knew, but I didn't care. Why, I wanted it all, right then. Couldn't wait. I thought I deserved it. I'm your son, right?" Trevor's voice cracked. "When Scarlett offered the plan, I agreed. I'm not a victim. I chose this." Benjamin nodded slowly. "At least you're finally honest. Is there any chance you could forgive me?" "Ever." Benjamin pushed an envelope through the slot. Transfer documents, Pinnacle Industries, 100% ownership to Rebecca Eleanor Ashford, effective 6 months ago. Trevor's hand froze. "You gave her everything. 6 months ago. It's hers now. CEO, majority shareholder, everything." "And me?" Benjamin stood looking down through the scratched plexiglass. "You are no longer my son. Legally, emotionally, financially. You chose greed over family. You sent me to hell for 2 years. You'll serve 18. When you get out, you'll have nothing. No name, no legacy, no father. Dad, please. I'm not your father. Not anymore. Rebecca is my daughter, my only child. She stood by me. She sacrificed. She chose family when you chose betrayal. Blood means nothing. Loyalty means everything, and you have none." Benjamin turned toward the exit. "Dad!" Trevor's voice cracked desperate. "Please!" Benjamin paused. The room held its breath. Would he turn back? No. He walked through the door. It closed with a clang of metal. He didn't look back. Outside, January sunlight was brilliant. Benjamin walked toward the parking lot, feeling lighter with every step. A black sedan waited. Rebecca leaned against it, smiling. Christopher Wade stood beside her, hand on her shoulder. She leaned into him naturally. Benjamin approached, smiling. "So it's official?" Rebecca blushed. "Dad, we were going to tell you." "Christopher." Benjamin extended his hand. "You planning to marry my daughter?" Christopher's eyes widened. "Sir, I should have asked. She's 30 years old. Doesn't need permission, just needs my blessing. You gonna treat her right?" "Every day," Christopher said firmly. "Then you have my blessing." Benjamin pulled him into a brief hug. "Take care of her. She saved my life." "I will, sir. I promise." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "How did it go?" "It's done," Benjamin said simply. "Completely done, forever. Let's go home." They got into the car, Rebecca in front, Benjamin in back, Christopher driving. As they pulled away, Benjamin looked in the rearview mirror. The gray prison walls grew smaller, then disappeared. The past, finally buried. He watched Rebecca laugh at something. Christopher said, watched the way she touched his arm. This was family, real family. Not blood, not DNA, but loyalty, sacrifice, love, choice. The car drove north away from the prison toward Atlanta and the life they had fought to reclaim. Benjamin looked at his daughter, the woman who'd saved him, who'd proven that family wasn't about genetics. "Rebecca," he said quietly. She turned. "Yes, Dad. Thank you for everything. For 2 years of sacrifice. For choosing me. For being my daughter." Rebecca's smile was radiant. "There was never a choice, Dad. You're my father. That's all that matters." They drove in comfortable silence heading home. Pinnacle Industries belonged to Rebecca now. She'd earned it through character, not blood. As the prison disappeared completely, Benjamin felt the last chain fall away. He was free, truly free, and he had a daughter who deserved everything.
This is my family story. A story of betrayal that nearly destroyed me, and of truth that slowly rebuilt what was broken. I'm Benjamin Ashford, 73 years old, and I'm sharing this not to seek sympathy, but to offer a warning I learned too late. If I could speak to my younger self, I would tell him this: don't confuse blood with loyalty. I trusted DNA more than character. I gave my son everything: love, opportunity, protection. And when greed took root, I made excuses instead of facing the truth. That blind trust cost me 2 years of my life behind bars for a crime I never committed. Please don't make the same mistake I did. Here is what I learned the hard way. Character reveals itself long before betrayal does. I ignored the signs because I wanted peace in my family. But silence does not heal corruption, it protects it. Real love tells the truth even when it's uncomfortable. During my darkest nights in that prison cell, I prayed. I asked God for justice, for strength, for a reason to keep going. And God answered, but not in the way I expected. He didn't return the son I had lost. Instead, God revealed the daughter who had been fighting for me all along. Rebecca, my adopted daughter, gave up 2 years of her life to stand in the shadows, gathering truth piece by piece, so I could one day walk free. This story taught me that family is not defined by DNA, but by sacrifice. My biological son shared my blood, but not my values. My daughter shared my values, my faith, and my courage, even when it cost her everything. Through her, God reminded me that loyalty is a choice, not an accident of birth. So here is my advice to you. Don't let greed poison your family. Don't ignore warning signs out of fear, and don't assume that time will fix what honesty refuses to confront. And above all, remember, true family stands beside you when the world turns its back. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced family betrayal or found strength in chosen family? If you believe stories like this matter, consider sharing this video with someone who needs it. And subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of faith, justice, and redemption. Thank you sincerely for staying with me until the end. And a gentle note before you go. The next story includes some fictionalized elements crafted for educational and reflective purposes. If this type of content isn't right for you, feel free to exit and choose something that better fits your needs.